by general. Oh, sorry, I did not wait for the program in progress. So today we're presenting on Lean on Me, Overcoming Loneliness Together. So what does it mean to be lonely? Let me start this over again because it automatically played. We want to give a definition to loneliness because I think it's a little different than what what sometimes our regular definition of loneliness is.
Loneliness is just a concept of being by yourself, because you can be surrounded by people in your day-to-day life, have family and friends, you still feel lonely and isolated.
Loneliness to me means when you're kind of in a space where when you need someone to talk to, you don't really have someone to talk to, and you kind of feel like you're just enclosed in this bubble, like you're isolated kind of thing around.
I know it's a feeling of isolation, not necessarily being isolated from people, but you can also be isolated from your emotions. You can have a big family, but you can still feel quite alone.
Okay, so I think they did a great job of explaining what loneliness means. Loneliness is not just not being around people, because obviously we can be around a big family, we can be at a party, we can be in a room full of people, and we can still feel lonely. It is more about that feeling of isolation, they said. They brought up emotions. It's more of a feeling of having nobody to talk to, feeling like nobody really understands what you're going through. That's all part of loneliness. And so what is this loneliness epidemic? In recent years, about 1 in 2 adults in America reported experiencing loneliness, and that was before the COVID-19 pandemic. But that did cut us off from so many friends and loved ones and support systems, which only exacerbated our feeling of loneliness and isolation. So the expectation is that the number went up from 50% to a little more than 50%. Now, it's not just in America. This is a worldwide phenomenon, but of course our numbers are mainly going to come from the United States. So what does this mean? So across age groups, people are spending less time with each other in person than we did 2 decades ago. It is most pronounced in young people aged 15 to 24. However, the second biggest age group to report this is actually retirees, people over the age of 65 who feel more isolated than they did before. So Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the previous US Surgeon General, did say we've just lived through a dramatic pace of change. We move more, we change jobs more often. I think this is very true. This is a time where we live in such a global society, right? People tend to change jobs less than every 2 years on average. So you're not building those kind of connections necessarily. With those job changes, you might move more often. It's hard, especially as an adult, to meet new friends and meet new people. You might not live near family as often as people did before. And this has all really been a rapid change and development in the world. It didn't happen slowly. It kind of happened at a very speedy pace. Social media is, of course, a big reason. Social media is being used as replacements for spending time in person, but this does mean lower quality connections. I see this with my teenagers. They spend a lot of time either gaming with friends online or using social media, which means they're actually not cultivating those in-person relationships as much. I sometimes feel like this need to push, hey, let's make a plan in person with friends. Let's go out on a hike, because they are okay spending hours without actually speaking to a human being in front of them. They don't use the phone to make phone calls. And there's all different ways that this can happen. And so this is very much young people. However, it's growing. I think most of the population uses social media as a tool. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It just means that we have lower quality connections with people. And then this was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We can say that was a few years ago, but we are still seeing the effects of that pandemic. You know, our children may not have, may struggle to make friends a little more easily. We may have lost some of those connections. Maybe we're still working from home. Not necessarily a bad thing either. It just means then that you really have to find the time to make plans and meet people. So I'm gonna show this video. It's about 6.5 minutes, but it really talks about the loneliness epidemic and specifically social media, but it brings in other reasons that the loneliness epidemic has started. And I think it's actually a very good video. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they say in the video afterwards.
One of the lessons that you talk about in the book is around the subject of loneliness. I feel that there's an epidemic amongst teenagers, retirees, middle-aged men, millennials. It's prolific in this country, Daniel. What is the role social media is playing in this epidemic?
Yeah, it's a big role. So to kind of put a little bit of a finer point on your excellent observation, in a lot of respects, things have never been better in this country. I mean, we've had high-profile acts of violence here in Georgia very recently. That's sort of an ongoing tragedy in our country, which we should take very seriously and continue to address. But writ large, there's never been a safer time in human history than right now. Never been a more prosperous time. And yet nobody seems to be very happy. When you look at Gen X and on down in terms of generations, Gen X and younger, at least 51% of those generations, so most people say that they are lonely, that they are socially isolated. And it gets in the low 70% when you get to, the generation that's the age of like my oldest child, so teenagers. I can't remember what that generation is called now for the life of me, but maybe Gen Z, maybe. Anyway,
I think it's Gen Z. There's Zoomers.
Yeah. So you've got between 50 and 73% of middle-aged to young people saying they're lonely. And this isn't a high-class problem. When you look at the data around this isn't just first world problems or, rich folks whining. The physical complications that come along with social isolation are incredibly bad. It's the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It is twice as lethal as obesity in terms of its impacts on longevity. Like it's bad, bad, bad for you. So what are the causes of this? I think the causes of this are myriad. I think part of it is the breakdown of a lot of what served as support structures historically. People trust government less. People trust institutions less. People are less religious. Like a lot of the sort of political, religious, and civic organizations that would have once been hubs for connection are now widely mistrusted. So I think that's a big piece of it. But I think social media, to your original question, I think social media also plays a big part. And there's a couple of things at play here. One is it gives people a false sense of what the world is like, because the tendency on social media is to just play the hits. Like we play all of our accomplishments, right? I mean, look, I'll roast myself. Like I posted about it on social media when I lost 50 pounds, but I did not post on it on social media for a decade and a half when I was overweight. Like, nobody, like that didn't make it to LinkedIn, right? That like, hey, I had to get some new pants because the old ones don't fit. And so, I mean, this is just sort of how the world works, right? You get the 50-pound weight loss, but not the 50-pound weight gain. And, multiply that times a million other sort of social interactions. And, you and I are acutely aware of every insecurity, every screw up, every foible, every mistake. And meanwhile, we're seeing other people's greatest hits collection. And so we assume that other people have it more together and are more polished than they actually are. And there's a distance, there's a distance that comes with that. The other thing is, I think a lot of the most damning and damaging parts of modern life are what I'll call counterfeits, right? So I think social media is by and large a counterfeit form of connection. Like it's empty calories, to continue our theme here. It has like the look, taste, smell, feel of social connection without any of the substance. And so, it feels like you're connecting with people when you send them, 100 Snapchats a day of you vomiting a rainbow or something, but it doesn't, it doesn't have the same, it doesn't gratify or sate our needs for connection at the same level as a more fundamental human connection would.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Daniel, as somebody who has a decent social media footprint, I can tell you that as that grew, I felt less connected to my own personal network because of everything you just laid out. I wasn't picking up the phone and calling people as much as I used to because I felt like I was connected. And I just wasn't because it was all done through social media.
I think social media can be a catalyst for in-person connection, right? Like there are some very real and very rich relationships I enjoy in real life that have been started on social media. But we have to take it off the page, right? We have to take it off the screen for it to get good.
Yeah, and be very deliberate about it, which admittedly I've lacked doing that myself some.
Okay, so sorry, just want to get on to the next slide. Okay, I'll talk about the effects of loneliness in a moment, but I did want to go through some of the points that they made because I do think it's really important. As I mentioned, the number is larger than 50%, especially with teens. They mentioned 73% of teens report feeling lonely. That is a very high and very dangerous number. They talked about social media playing a very big role. And I do believe that false narrative that you see, you're not experiencing people's whole lives. You're not sharing your whole life like you might when you get together with friends or with family. You're not sharing all your biggest concerns. You're really just sharing the joys. So, there's something nice about that. It's great to see other people's vacations. It's great to be able to post and show people what you're doing. However, we have to understand that not everybody is taking these beautiful luxury vacations. And even when they are, not every moment is filled with great happiness. There are struggles along the way. And so that can only exacerbate our feeling of loneliness because you start feeling like, well, when I try to do that, X, Y, and Z happened and got in the way, and I didn't feel that happy. I didn't look that happy the whole time. They're just snapshots of our lives, and snapshots of the happiest moments in our life, typically. And like I said, when you're with people in person, you're going to get more of that story. You're going to hear about the good and some of the bad, maybe not all of it, but at least some of it. And then you can start relating to that and you can feel comforted sometimes by that. You can also get advice, or even just letting it out can also sometimes help. I think the idea that there's not as much trust within our communities, whether it's with governments and institutions, that we are less religious. I mean, there's different reasons for this, but we don't have these same points of community that we used to see more and more. And again, that's partially due to the pandemic where we lost some of that, where more of our meetings are on social media, on places like Zoom, where we are not having that face-to-face connection. In some ways, it can make it easier. Hopefully, you're getting something out of this presentation, even though it is all happening on Zoom. And I think the idea that there is physical damage to our impacts on health cannot be stressed enough. We feel stress, anxiety, and depression when we feel lonely, which can lead to suicidality, self-harm, all terrible things. And it can also have great effects on our physical health. inflammation, increased risk of dementia, risk of stroke and heart disease, type 2 diabetes, premature death. They mentioned how the effects of loneliness are worse than the effects of smoking and trying to remember the other thing they said. I didn't write that down. And obesity. I don't know if that's maybe a little exaggerated or not. I will leave that up to the health department. It seems slightly exaggerated to me, but I think it is meant to stress that there are great physical damages done by the loneliness people are feeling, and we cannot stress that enough. So the big question then is, how can we overcome loneliness and social isolation? I think that's really the point of what we want to talk about here. There are ways to overcome it. So there's vital components of social connection that have to do with structure, function, and quality. So the structure is the number and variety of relationships and the frequency of interactions. We list some examples here: your household size, your friend circle size, and your marital and partner status. That all affects the structure, like how you who you communicate with and how you're communicating with them. And then the function is the degree to which relationships serve various needs. So you need social connection for that emotional support, that mentorship, and that can take on different roles. That could be just venting. It could mean getting feedback and advice from people. And you also need support in a crisis. And then the quality of social connection really cannot be stressed enough. The positive and negative aspects of relationships and interactions. And I've got a lot to say about this because I think this is some of which is my own observation, what teens are really missing out on, because so much of their interactions are happening online, and they're not seeing the other person. That's where we're seeing a lot more bullying happening, because kids don't necessarily understand the effects because they're not seeing it in person. They're not seeing how devastated somebody can necessarily feel. They're hiding behind a screen and they kind of feel like it's not a real person there, which of course it is. It also means that you're not necessarily even having these real discussions, maybe even arguments, I might say, where you kind of learn to have those interactions with other people, that it's okay to, not fight, I'm not trying to say that, but it's okay to disagree, and it's okay to try to talk through things and understand things. That's a high quality relationship when you can do that with somebody. You can push a little bit and also understand when to back off. And when we don't cultivate these stronger social connections, we lose that, which I think is what breeds mistrust and this idea that we're feeling isolated from one another. And the quality of these relationships, of course, important. You can have a large household, but if you're not feeling connected to, your siblings or your cousins or your spouse or whoever else it is that you might live with, then that's a low quality connection. That's not going to help you that much overcome that feeling of loneliness. You can have a very large group of friends, but if all of them are people that you just see at parties and you just have very basic conversations about the weather with, it's also not a high quality connection. So that is just as important to keep in mind, if not more so, the quality of connections. So the advisory committee from the U.S. General Surgeon made a lot of recommendations. I'm going to go through them briefly because a lot of them are not for individuals. We'll focus more on that. But they talked about strengthening social infrastructure. Now, social infrastructure is places like the library, like libraries in our community. Every community has a library, and they are very important to the social infrastructure of the community. Community gardens, like the health department, helps run the programs in the summer. Things like that are all part of our social infrastructure, and that is set forth by really local government. Make pro-connection public policies. This is a the role of the government, but we can all advocate for that. We want to mobilize the health sector. That's why we're so happy to partner with our health department. The health sector needs to understand the effects loneliness can have on individuals and communities, and really have recommendations for it. Reforming digital environments, there's some we can do on our own. However, this actually is probably a really big push. I'm thinking of banning cell phones in schools. We're starting to see not just local school boards doing this, but we're seeing now whole states trying to take on that initiative. Teaching, our children and teens that they do not have to have their phones and devices on them all the time. And we could probably all learn from that. And we can do things, like I said, on our own as families. We can say, hey, every day we're going to take an hour without our phones. Maybe that's dinner time. Maybe we're going to play a game, something like that. Or, no phones on Sundays, that kind of thing. So reforming digital environments can make a big difference. We want to deepen our knowledge, understand the loneliness epidemic. I think that's what we're all doing right now. And cultivate a culture of connection. Really, that's going to tie into all the other previous recommendations made. So those are more broader and really more, in a way, governmental and policy oriented. But what can we do for ourselves? That's really the big question. Since loneliness is about the quality of connections, you're going to want to find ways that suit your lifestyle or interest you. So leave your phone behind and see what kinds of connections you can make. Now, I think everybody who is here or watching this program later can say library programs can be a great way of overcoming loneliness. I'll let Cindy talk about this a little bit either now. Cindy, do you want to jump in and talk about the library programs you have for adults?
Sure. We have a variety of programs here at the library for adults. We have author programs, our Author Speak series, where we offer a light lunch to people, and we have an author speak. We had one yesterday, and we had about 30 people here, and it is a nice social event. And we have concerts occasionally. We had a concert last Saturday, and we had about 40 people, and we're just getting back to doing the concerts in person. This was actually the first one we've done in person here at the library in quite a while. But and we have craft programs for adults on a Saturday morning a month, and we get a group of people in our Studio One area, and so they do a variety of different things each month. And we have a book group that meets monthly. We read the same book and we talk about it. Tomorrow is our meeting for January, and we'll be discussing A Shadow in Moscow by Catherine Kay. And in February, the book we're doing is Strength in What Remains by Tracy Kidder, and it's always the last Thursday of the month. People brown bag their lunch. They bring their own lunch. We supply beverages and desserts, and so, and it's nice. It's a nice group. We have some programs on Zoom for people that are homebound that still need to have connection. And we hope we offer that kind of connection. And we're going to be offering some things with the Norwalk Senior Center and at some of the assisted living places here in Norwalk. So if you have any questions, if anyone has any questions about library programs for adults, you can call the reference desk. And we put flyers out, we put it on the website, and we encourage people to come because it's a nice way to meet people and to make friends and have a social connection. Thanks, Vicki.
Thanks, Cindy. And I'll just make a plug if there's any parents out there. Our children's department, I'm head of youth library services. We have lots of programs for children, and many parents meet each other that way. We have, lots at story times for babies and for tunes and tales for toddlers, but also we try to create an environment in the whole library that makes it comfortable for people to sit. Kids can play up here while the grown-ups talk, chat, or find books. And downstairs, it's the same as well. There are always places and people you can meet here. So this library program, sorry, we are the library, so that was a bigger plug than we'll do for the rest. But finding a hobby is always a great thing. And maybe it's something you've always wanted to try, gardening, knitting, crocheting, travel. There's so many hobbies out there, hiking, there, I could go on and on. You can find a group to match any hobby. There's a running club in Norwalk. There are walking clubs. There's even movie clubs, so you can talk about movies with other people. So finding a new hobby can be a great way to meet new people. Journaling, which yes, is more of an isolated activity, but it can help you understand what you're looking for. So we always recommend journaling as a way to see in a day, maybe what made you happy. It can be a gratitude journal where you're just writing down the things that you did that day or saw that day that did make you happy. So you can really learn to seek those out again. Volunteering can be a great way to foster social connections. You can find something that interests you. There is a new program, volunteer readers at preschools and daycares around Norwalk. If you're interested in that, we can help set that up. We train for that. And then we're working with the Early Childhood Council. And that's been a great way to really find joy in working and helping out in the community. You can take a class, which sometimes goes along with finding a new hobby, but there's classes for really everything. But there's a lot of craft classes, knitting classes, things like that. So you can learn new things while meeting new people. Joining a club. Again, we talked about different clubs you could join. Now, taking social risks, that means different things for different people. I like to say that could mean going out to lunch by yourself. Again, it's an isolated activity, but you'd be surprised at sometimes how if you start making that a regular thing, going out for coffee by yourself or going out to lunch, you start seeing other people and you might strike up a conversation. Maybe it means if you're sitting on a train and if the person next to you is not wearing headphones or reading a book, like you might strike up a conversation. Sometimes it's those small moments that can make a really big difference in your life. And then very importantly, not most importantly, but very importantly, don't become too busy. This doesn't mean finding a new hobby for every day of the week or going to a class, 3 or 4 times a week. This really might mean, finding one hobby and really diving into it and meeting new people. It doesn't mean, all of a sudden making lunch plans every single day. You really want to enjoy, and again, it's about the quality, not the quantity. So you really want to enjoy what you're doing and learn. And, sometimes it's a risk, sometimes it doesn't work out, and then you can try something new, but don't overextend yourself. That will actually make you feel more lonely. So here's another video. This is a little shorter on ways to create social connection. It is from the UK, so they'll mention that, but it applies globally.
It can be hard to connect with people sometimes, especially when we're busy, stressed, or feeling low. But there's lots of evidence that keeping in close touch can help us feel happier and healthier, whether it's with friends, family, neighbors, or people at work. It can even protect us against becoming unwell. There's lots of ways to lead a life full of healthy human interaction. How you choose to do it is up to you. Quality social connection comes in lots of forms, and usually the more connected you are, the better the benefits. So here's some simple tips for building better social connections into your life. Tip 1, make plans. Make time to talk, set plans with people, and stick to them. Tip 2, connect every day. Try to connect with family or someone you trust each day. This could include a fixed family time, where everyone puts away their phones and shares an activity, has a meal, or just talks. This doesn't just have to be close friends and family either. Even having casual friends and acquaintances can have benefits. Try joining a new club, or going out to events to meet new people. Simply talking on the phone, exchanging emails, or the occasional text message to keep in touch. Tip 3, connect with your interests. Have a look for events or courses in your local area that interest you. Fill up your diary, go along and say hello to the people there. It's a great way of opening up opportunities to meet like-minded people. Websites like meetup.com have a wide range of local social groups around the UK. Tip 4, reach out. Sharing your thoughts can really help, whether it's with someone you know, a volunteer, or professional. There's always someone who can listen. Have a think if there's someone you used to be close to, who you could reconnect with. When you're talking with someone, reach out and be curious by asking them questions about themselves. This can really help you make a good connection. There are also lots of fantastic helplines with trained staff and volunteers who care about what you have to say and can offer you help if you need it. You can find details on the Every Mind Matters website. Tip 5, offer a helping hand. If you like, you can even volunteer your time to help others. Not only is it a kind thing to do, giving to others is also a proven way to improve our own mental health, and it's a great way to connect with other volunteers as well as the people you're supporting. Find something you're interested in, or a local charity, and get in touch to see if they need any help. Or you can even just offer a favor to a neighbor or help out a colleague at work. Connection is important. We can all do simple things to be a little more social and help those in our lives do the same.
So I really like some of the suggestions they had in that video, and I just want to say meetup.com is also in the United States. There are many groups. It's even for learning new languages. There's Spanish meetups, there's English meetups, knitting meetups, movie meetups, so many different ideas. And so I just liked what they had to say about that. Sometimes it does start with just a text message. Maybe that's all you feel like you can do at that moment. But it is also about then trying to go a step further with that. Like they said, maybe if you hear somebody's moving at work, offer to help them out with that if you're able to. That can help strengthen your bond and create a deeper connection with that person. There's so many small things we can do to really build community. And that's so important for the loneliness epidemic. So I do have resources on here. This is for seeking support for feeling lonely, but also possibly the deeper effects of loneliness. If you're feeling suicidal or you feel like you need more help than just reaching out to friends and family. So we'll be putting all of this on our site, plus you'll be able to access this video and watch this presentation. But there are many centers and organizations, including the library and the health department, that can help with this. There's also many sources we took from for this. I love to plug this book, Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinenberg. I think it's just a wonderful read about social connection. It was actually written quite a few years ago, but very relevant today. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I know I'm a little bit under time, but that gives us time for questions. If you have any or ideas, I'd love to hear.